Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Stephen Bartkus, the director of the Ridgefield Historical Society. Today's date is Tuesday, July 15th, 2025, and I'd like to welcome you all to the Ridgefield History Club here at the Ridgefield Historical Society's headquarters at the Scott House. We're at 4 Sunset Lane in Ridgefield, Connecticut. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Historical Society, we're dedicated to collecting, preserving, and sharing the entire history of Ridgefield, from the indigenous peoples who lived here thousands of years ago all the way up to the present day. And I invite all of you to get involved here in the important work that we do for the community by becoming members of the Historical Society and volunteers. Our upcoming programs include Summerfest. We will have a booth with lots of Ridgefield history on Saturday, July 26th. From 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. That's on Main Street in Ridgefield, so I hope you'll be able to stop by and say hi to us at Summerfest. And then, of course, at the end of the month, on Sunday, July 27th, we'll have the Peter Parley Schoolhouse open on West Lane. Jack Sanders and Sally Sanders will be there from 1 to 4 p.m. And it's Samuel Goodrich's birthday, so you'll be learning more about him on that day at the Peter Parley Schoolhouse, so please join us. So for today, we are going to be talking about when Ridgefield was a summer resort. Not too many people realize that this was a major vacation destination back in the day, and we're so fortunate to have Jack Sanders with us here today. He is a Ridgefield historian, author of over 10 books on Ridgefield's history, and former editor of the Ridgefield Press paper for over 40 years, a longtime member and volunteer at the Ridgefield Historical Society, and he, of course, is the owner of the Old Ridgefield Facebook page. So Jack, thank you so much for putting this slide presentation together, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hi, thank you. And first off, I want to say that if you have any comments or questions, just yell out. This is very informal. This is not a lecture. It's a talk. And especially if you have some observations on things that you see here and that you know something about. Although a lot of this is older than any of us, because the real resort era in Ridgefield was from about 1870 until early 1920s. That's when Ridgefield had become a destination, and we'll talk about how that happened at the beginning here. That, by the way, is a view of the center of town around 1905, before the arrival of the automobile. I don't think there's a single horseless carriage in that picture. They're all horse-drawn. And judging from the number of people that you see, it must have been some special event. It could have been Sunday church. St. Stephen's was right over this way. Oh, which reminds me, I should get the pointer out. But this is one of my favorite old pictures of Ridgefield, the center of town, and what it looked like in the old days. Please pardon the little things coming up on the corner. Keep on forgetting to turn off the internet when I come in here. Okay, so how did we get to be a destination? In the 1800s, strange things were happening in Ridgefield. The town had been growing ever since it was founded in 1708, and pretty steadily, and it got up to the point where in 1840 there were 2,474 people in town. But then things started to change. Population got smaller and smaller, and by 1870 we're down to 1919. It had dropped 13% from 1860 to 1870. What was happening?
Civil War.
Well, the first thing that happened is that in 1842, Ridgefield gave up a huge chunk of Ridgefield. Ridgefield used to extend from Ridgebury along the New York state line all the way to New Fairfield. So all of today's western Danbury was part of Ridgefield then. And it was kind of ridiculous because people, I mean, way up north, close to 15 miles away, would have to travel 15 miles to get to town meeting, for instance, to vote, or to pay their taxes, or do anything in the center of Ridgefield. We were too spread out, so we ceded that territory to Danbury. Got nothing in return, I don't think. But other things were happening. Farming techniques were changing. Equipment was being developed that allowed farmers to have bigger fields, to harvest bigger quantities of crops. In Ridgefield, in its very rocky soil, all the fields were walled in with stone walls and were small, and it was very difficult to make them big. And many of them were hilly. It just was not good territory for growing large amounts of corn, grain. This was not a wheat area, for instance. Buckwheat, yes, but not plain old ordinary wheat. So instead, young people started looking, who were growing up here, started looking elsewhere. They started moving west. And west could have been New York State, western New York, had vast areas that were opening up out, toward Buffalo, that wing of the state. Ohio, parts of Ohio were once Connecticut. Indiana, places like that were farming, had allowed for big farms, and didn't have soil that was full of rocks. One of the things we forget is that, they went around and they pulled all the rocks up and they, got fields set up, but more rocks kept coming. Frost just ran up more rocks. So every year they had to go out and pick rocks out of the earth. It was a lot of work. And thus, most of Ridgefield's farms for the first century and 2 centuries were subsistence farms. They were farms where you had enough, you had animals, you had cows, maybe a couple of cows, chickens, pigs, turkeys maybe, and just enough things that to feed your own family and maybe sell some butter, sell some, maybe occasionally a pig, and make a little side money. But you weren't in it to make big bucks, and that just didn't happen. So this was all building up, and after the war, and you had all these young men who went off to fight in the Union Army, seeing this vast country that they had never seen before. They lived in Ridgefield. They probably never went 5 or 10 miles outside of town in their whole lives. And here they're seeing what a great country there was out there. Many of them just took off and settled elsewhere. So we got down to 1919, and the town fathers were getting pretty worried about that. It meant that the economy was affected. They were afraid that things were going to keep going down and down. They had no way of knowing what would happen. And you can see that even after we start doing something, it took a while before it got up to the level it was in 1840. But what they decided was that Ridgefield may not be great for farming, but it has a wonderful climate compared to the big metropolitan area nearby, which was New York City. New York in summer was a hellhole. It was hot, being the ocean. It was humid. There were lots of bugs. There was tons of horse crap in the roads. There were rats. There were pigs wandering around. Chickens. I mean, it was a little, it wasn't quite as gentrified as it became later in the 19th century. So a lot of people found New York in the summer to be a very unpleasant experience. And it was also disease prone. Malaria, typhoid, other things like that would develop. So Ridgefield had clean air, clean water, beautiful scenery. It had history, and a very scenic Main Street. Even then, I mean, the houses along Main Street were all well maintained, and the street was unusually wide. It was a pretty place to go, but it was hard to get to. The roads were terrible. If they were wet, they were muddy. The horse-drawn vehicle, it's just not pleasant. It takes a long time. In 1852, the Danbury and Norwalk Railroad was established with a 19-mile strip of rail from South Norwalk up to Danbury. It touched the very southeast corner of Ridgefield, but that's what we call Branchville now. It was still a big haul up the mountain to get to Ridgefield in a carriage from the station. It was not convenient. So you had these town fathers, some of whom had become wealthy people in New York. The Hawleys and the Kings had a lot of business connections in New York City. And the other thing that was happening in the country back then was railroads. In 1865, there were about 35,000 miles of railroad track in the United States. 5 years later, there was 45,000. And by the end of the century, another 150,000 miles of track was laid in the United States. So railroad building was a big industry back then, and it exploded after the war. And so I'm pretty sure some of these town fathers started talking to the business people in New York who were involved in transportation. Hawley, well, let's just, this is a map of Ridgefield in 1867, 2 years after the war. And already you see a railroad line proposed for Ridgefield coming in south of South Salem Road, south of Route 35 in New York City, and going up to Titicus. And here's a little blow-up of this area here. And they even show a depot set up opposite the cemetery and just up from the Titicus School.
Wow.
1867. So somebody is talking. This would be this doesn't have a name there, but there were a bunch of different stock companies that were proposing to do a railroad basically along that line. And at one point, they actually built the bed, and the bed is still there. You can still see it on Golf Lane and certain other places in town. But they never laid track. The idea was, even though there was this line over here that went up to Danbury, this was a shorter route. It would connect to down in Greenwich or Portchester, or maybe over on the Harlem line. which was just being developed. So this would have been probably a better, faster route from New York into Ridgefield, and their ultimate plan was to continue it on to Danbury. However, the owner of the Danbury and Norwalk Railroad, the head of it, whose name was Lockwood, as in the Lockwood Matthews Mansion in Norwalk, that was his house, he decided that he was going to beat this competition, and he was going to run a railroad up into the center of Ridgefield from what was then called Ridgefield Station, which was renamed Branchville, and this became Ridgefield Station. So this line, which had Florida Station and Cooper Station on it also, was built in 1870 at a cost that exceeded the price of building the entire 19 miles from Norwalk to Danbury. It was a tough haul, 4 miles as opposed to 19, but they used a huge amount of blasting powder, nitroglycerin, black powder to blow up rocks. It was the rock outcroppings were incredible on this route. So and it's a big haul. This is about 350 feet above sea level down here, and up here it's about 750. That in a 4 mile stretch is a very steep grade for a train, and the trains going up that grade went very slowly, and going down they had to have the brakes on most of the time. But what happened? We got a station in the center of town, and this is a very early picture of it, probably late 1870s, maybe 1880. But it may have been just after it was built. Nobody is certain. But you'll notice that this is all open, the roof. That was a big cistern. It collected water, and they used the water at the station and for the trains.
Is that down here at Ridgefield Supply?
That's down at Ridgefield Supply, that's correct. Now this would be Main Street up here. I think like the library would be over here, but of course the library wasn't built yet. I think this may be
Smith?
it might have been the Sheehan House, what was later the Sheehan House, but it might be the National Barn, I don't know. But anyway. But now, you could get on a train at Grand Central Terminal in New York and get to Ridgefield in an hour and 45 minutes in comfort on a nice padded seat and on nice smooth rails, as opposed to bouncing up and down through the mud slowly at times, and or a lot of times by a horse and carriage, a stage. And that made Ridgefield very attractive in another way. So you started to see things in newspapers like this, which points out that Ridgefield was one of the few places exempt from fever and ague last summer. Ague was basically malaria. The village is situated at an elevation of 900 feet, which is a lie. And the climate is particularly adapted for the convalescence of those suffering from malaria. Railroad connection from New York to the village. And it says apply to E. Judson Hawley, 50 Wall Street. E. Judson Hawley, we'll see in a couple of moments, was a banker at 50 Wall Street. That's the name of his bank. And he was a son of Irad Hawley. Irad was a big name in New York for having built canals and railroads in Pennsylvania and New York to haul coal. So he knew, Hawleys knew railroads, so I'm sure they were somehow involved in getting interest in connecting the center of Ridgefield to New York City. But you notice that this ad is promoting health. This is, you're going to see a lot of that. This is E. Judson Hawley's, an ad for his business in New York. Doctors recommend Ridgefield. Now, the interesting thing about this story is that it says, you know, that which has contributed largely to the success of Ridgefield as a summer resort is the influence of many of the prominent physicians of New York who have induced their patients to pass the summer here. It doesn't say that Ridgefield is healthful anywhere in this story. It just says that doctors recommend it. It's just like TV ads, you know. And then it gives a whole list of doctors, and some of those doctors were pretty high up in both the social and medical levels of New York society. This was in that ad was from 1894 in the New York Times, or that story. This ad here, whoops. Oh, this shows the result of some of this publicity. This is this train station in 1900, and you see all of these carriages lined up waiting for the train to arrive to bring their customers home. And I think you'll see a couple here that look like they're backed in. Now, I think those were the equivalent of taxis, what they call then liveries, who were just waiting for anybody who would need Howard King, who lived at the corner of King Lane and Main Street. There's J. Howard King there. He had a house here that was moved and burned down, but this is the main King homestead there. He was deeply involved in promoting High Ridge as a place, as a destination for wealthy people from New York to build their summer cottages, quote unquote. And you'll see, this is 1867. Notice E.J. and D.E. Hawley. There's E. Judson and Daniel Edwin Hawley, his brother. And both of them, again, are sons of Irad. And they, Irad grew up right here across Main Street in the Hawley house right there. By 1906, look at all the big mansions that had been built on High Ridge. This is the same stretch here. And you have the Holt Mansion, the Post Mansion, later the Herricks, E.P. Dutton, the publisher, Charles A. Hamilton, the Silver Company president, A. Barton Hepburn, who was controller of the United States, Jenner, William A. Jenner was a patent lawyer, I think. And then you get down into the Peter Parley house down in here, which is an antique.
Who was Miss Morris?
Who?
Is that say Miss Morris?
Yeah, I don't know who she is. She didn't last very long, I don't think.
Single women maybe last long.
She was, I think, a socialite, but I can't remember the name of her father, who I think had a place there. Okay, this is looking south on High Ridge. This is the Dutton house. This is the Hamilton house. This is E. Barton Hepburn's Alta Craig, and dinner and whatever that way. So, another thing that was happening, a lot of publicity about Ridgefield being a summer resort. This is a New Haven newspaper in 1871, only a year after we got the train station. And it's saying the Reverend D.W. Teller of Howard Avenue Congregational Church in New Haven has a cottage in that delightful summer resort, Ridgefield in Fairfield County. And his family are already there. Well, Teller would find Ridgefield such a delight that the following year, 1872, he signed on with the First Congregational Church and became its minister. And in 1878, he wrote a history of Ridgefield, the first formal history of the town. And he's buried here. He loved the town so much he wanted to be buried here, even though he went off in 1880 to another parish. Here's another, this different newspaper in New Haven, same year, 1871. More than 100 families have applied for boards in Ridgefield. They wanted to, spend a week or 2 weeks or a month in town, and they couldn't be accommodated. It becomes so popular. 1900 ad. Connecticut's Elysium. Leonard Beckwith, a local real estate agent. Delightful summer resort. And he says, notify me and I'll meet you at the station. Or you take the Adams and Keeler livery to my office. Again, that's like taking a taxi. By 1922, there were these, Ridgefield was showing up in a lot of tour guides. This is what this thing looks like. Here, it's a book, that shape, which I guess is very handy for sticking in a box, in a glove box in a car, even in 1922. And this is one of the trips from the there's this 4-hotel group at Pershing Square in New York City, the Biltmore, Commodore, Belmont, Murray Hill, and Ansonia 5 hotels. And they got together and they published this thing. And here's this particular trip, which is number 11, goes from New York up to Norwalk, Branchville, Ridgefield, Bedford, Purchase, Rye, and back down. And this is the description of the trip. And the only place they say anything about the nature of it is Ridgefield. And it says, turn west and run to Ridgefield, which is called the prettiest town in New England, with a village street 200 feet wide and large towering elms and maples, and in full foliage forms a perfect canopy over the road. None of these other towns do they say boo about. Ridgefield, they go bananas over. So, let's say you're coming in by train. This is where the station is. This is Prospect Street. This is where the library would be, but this is a tavern, so you could get off the train and go up and wet your whistle. But there were sidewalks. You walk by the sidewalk. You could go over to J.W. Rockwell's The Elm Shade Cottages, right there. This is Gilbert Street. Or you could go to the Union Hotel, owned by Mr. and Mrs. Neeram Dykeman. We'll see these in a moment. So, this is the earliest picture of any of these resort era inns. This is the Elms, then called the Elm Shade Cottages. This is the main building, no porch back then. This is a part of it, this is one of the cottages. There were others on the property. Big fence. This is the Casey house. This little wing here is where they found, underneath this wing is where they found 4 skeletons in 2009. And this is the Stebbins house, which was torn down to make way for Casagmo, which was torn down to make way for the condos. So this is 1878. This is a photo engraving, so it was based on a real photograph. And so there were actually people standing here. It's in Teller's history. Teller chose to use this kind of illustration in his book.
Jack, a quick question.
Yes.
Did they ever determine the nationality of the 4 bodies that were, or skeletons that have been found?
Not yet.
Still?
Right.
Oh.
This, incidentally, this inn started around 1870. Rockwell, John W. Rockwell, saw an opportunity with the arrival of the train station to operate an inn here, and he decided to do it, and it lasted an awful long time.
Forgive my,
Here's an ad
excuse
for
me.
the Elm Shade Cottages.
Jack?
Yes.
Excuse me, forgive my ignorance, the 4 skeletons that were discovered,
What, I can't.
the four skeletons that were discovered,
Yeah.
you asked,
They,
Stephen. Yeah.
they were doing some,
sorry.
they were doing some renovation in the basement that had a dirt floor, and they wanted to put a concrete floor in. And when the contractor was clearing it, they found a skeleton. And so they called the police, and the police called the state, and the state got somebody to come down, a state archaeologist to come down and study that. And Nick Bellantoni was that person, and he found 3 more skeletons there. And they were buried with their feet to the east, like a Catholic burial. And they were not able to determine at that time, and I guess still haven't been able to determine what the nationality was. Were they American or Continental soldiers? Were they British or Hessian soldiers?
So was that time period about the Revolutionary War
Yeah.
time period?
Right. And they found some buttons from jackets, and so they believe it was either British or Hessian.
No
Right.
Hessians.
No Hessians?
No, no
There
Hessians.
were no Hessians at the Battle of Ridgefield.
Oh, okay, then,
British.
okay.
Anyway, that's where,
Sorry.
that was a little earlier. Resort era. But if anybody wants to see the skeletons, I have pictures of them here. 800 feet above sea level, ideal summer resort in New England. Hour and 3/4 from New York on the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railway through cars. Large airy rooms, delightful surroundings, and table unsurpassed. Table meaning your dining. This is a picture, an early picture of, colorized picture of the Elm Shade Cottages. I get a kick out of this. This is, the Elms main building is right here beyond this tree. And this is a chauffeur driven or we'll see in a moment, a very fancily attired driven carriage. And this is a mother or a nanny and a baby and a little child. I imagine this as possibly tourists, and maybe they have stopped, they've gotten off of this, and they're going to go for a stroll. I think there's a pram here, sure, but I just thought it was very interesting to see what people looked like back then. This is about 1885, 1890. Notice the oil street lamp for the driveway to the Elms. Here's a closer look at that. I love the shine on the top hat. And here's the mommy or nanny, and it's quite possibly a nanny. There may be people staying at the Elms. Here's another view. This building, there's the main building down there. This building was, we always called the annex, the Elms Annex. A lot of apartments there, and a lot of people would stay for long periods, sometimes year-round, in that building. Among the people who have lived there was the granddaughter of Nathaniel Hawthorne, who spent her last years living there. Her name was Hildegard Hawthorne Oskinson, and she wrote a well-known biography of her grandfather, and also a lot of other books, mostly for kids. Wilbur Elliott Wilder, who was a general in the Indian Wars and in the Spanish-American and First World War, he got the Congressional Medal of Honor for rescuing a comrade during a battle with the Apaches in the 1880s. And he also went in alone by himself to Geronimo's camp to arrange for Geronimo's surrender a short while later. So he had quite an interesting life, and he came to Ridgefield for some reason or other, liked it, stayed here, is buried in Fair Lawn Cemetery. Another person who lived here is Alan Nevins, who spent a lot of time doing his research for his PhD here, and he went on to write 2 Pulitzer Prize-winning biographies, historical biographies, and we'll see something about him a little later. Another view of the Elm Shade Cottages. Here's, by now it's being called the Elms Inn. This is probably 1925, 1930. That sign says just the Elms. This is what happened to the tree that the sign was on. I think this is the Twister of 1950, which we just had the 75th anniversary of Sunday. But I'm not sure of the date falling. And this is the Elms today. And this is, they've all been turned into condominiums, but the building itself is almost identical to the 1930 Elms Inn. I mean, they really did a spectacular job of keeping the streetscape there and saving that building. Does anybody know whether there's 1 or 2 condos in that building?
1 or 2 what?
1 or 2.
That's what I want.
Yeah, there's 2. Because this one over here has 1 upstairs and 1 down. The annex has 1 upstairs and 1 downstairs.
Somehow I think the main house only has just one.
There's only 1 here,
I think that's,
because this goes back. This is all
but that's a
attached.
separate one in the
Yeah,
back.
that's separate.
That's separate.
Okay. Alrighty, so we're in the center of town now. Remember the Union Hotel that we saw on Main Street? We're standing about where Books on the Common is, and we're looking across at Planet Pizza, and this would be down toward where the toy store is.
Oh,
What's it?
the Masonic Hall.
Yeah, the old Masonic Hall. Little to this direction. None of these buildings are there now. These were torn down. These were houses but used by this time, I think, 1890 or so, used for stores on the bottom. And they were all owned by Smiths, and so was the hotel. The woman's maiden name was Smith, so I think there was a connection there. But anyway, the original Union Hotel was built just after the war. Union probably to recollect the Union Army. But in the 1870s, it burned down, and Needham, the male half of the ownership partnership, basically went insane. He lost everything, and he couldn't deal with it, and they put him in an asylum. His wife, however, was a lot stronger, Mary Ann Smith Dykeman, and she built a new hotel. This is what it looked like. It was called the Dykeman House. It had some other names. It was called the Inn for a while, and eventually it was called the Ornica Inn. Oh, yes, the Ornica Inn, and 3 stories. It had big columns in the front here. While these were torn down to make way for the Tudor-style building that's there now, this building was moved cross lots to High Ridge at Abbott Avenue, and it's still there today. And it's apartments. There's, I think, 5 apartments in there. And it was once the convent for the nuns who taught at St. Mary's. But it's nice to know that
That's the same building.
this guy that did this, he was not one to waste any money. Samuel Dent, that's his name, and he had his office was on Main Street by where Books on the Common is. Okay, so we're going to go south on Main Street, and we see the name L.H. Bailey. This is Bailey's house. This is Bailey's, this was a factory. It became a boarding house. But in the 1870s, when all this interest is being built up in Ridgefield as a destination, he turned it into a hotel. This was Bailey's store. It originally had been King and Dole's store. Bailey bought into it, and it moved it up to the center of town. It became D.F. Beatty and Company. But it was, before it was Beatty, it was Bailey and Gage. Okay, so that's where the Bailey Inn would be. And here's what it looked like. I love this picture because I think there's at least 3 dogs in it. And also this poor woman, the colorist just painted her face over with green so it looks like she's the headless guest. Another view, another dog. This must have been a very dog-friendly place. But you look at this, and this doesn't seem very spectacular. Even this picture, which you see a little more of it, but from a different angle, you realize that there's a whole another wing that's back there. And so it's twice the size of that. So it held a lot of people, and this was not only a place where tourists came, and it was a place where clubs met and people had bridge parties, and it was a very popular local hangout. Not necessarily for food, but it's a place to go to have events. And this, that rear wing is said to have been moved to the back of the King Homestead. Is that, is,
I believe that's so.
it would be interesting to try and get into the wood and see. Yeah, but which is right next door.
When you go through there, Jack, I mean, the rooms itself look like hotel rooms in that
They
way.
do, they
And
do.
they even had numbers on them when we.
Oh,
were-
well,
Oh,
there you go.
Really?
So I guess it's definitely true, so that's good to know. They tore down the building, the main building, in 1919, I think. Things were changing then, and that's why we sort of got out of the resort business, because there were more and more automobiles, and people could go farther, so places like Lenox or the Catskills and the Poconos, all those became attractive destinations, so we weren't so close. This is what the site of the inn looks like today. This is a garage, I think with an apartment over it, that was built only in the last 25, 30 years. So this was all empty for a long time. Down the south end of Main Street was one of the biggest of Ridgefield's inns. This is a sewer map. See these little, this line here, that's the sewer line that they were putting in. This is an 1899 map from Barbara's office.
Yeah.
It's on silver. It's
Yeah.
one of those silver maps that's deteriorating, so
I know.
it took a lot of messing around with software to get this as clear as it is. But it says Bacon's Inn. Love it. So who do we have here? This is Bacon's Inn. This is looking north from the south end of it. It's, again, on the east side of Lower Main Street, a little below Rockwell Road, between Rockwell Road and the Blinker light. Here's one view of it. Here's another. And this shows that same south side looking north, but you can see the wings off of the back here. This is where, these are support operations. We'll see in a moment what's inside there. But here's the same building, but it says it's the Ridgefield School. Well, this thing was built in 1893 to serve as an inn. And inn business is basically June to maybe September, maybe early October. And then basically they shut down. These things are terrible to heat. So it really wasn't designed for winter use. But in 1903, there were new owners who wanted to make the thing pay for itself. It was very expensive to hold on to this thing. So they wanted to find a winter use, and what they did was they leased it during the cold months to the Ridgefield School, a prep school for boys, operated by a man named Mulford. Well, that started in 1907 and continued to 1911, when Mulford was so successful that he could build a brand new, elaborate building on the north side of Lake Mamanasco on North Salem Road. And various outbuildings, gyms, and things like that, which was later Francis Martin's spread. So, again, this went back to being basically unused in winter. I guess they tried to get people to come for Christmas in Connecticut or whatever. But it too eventually was torn down. because it just could not support itself. Here's, we happen to be very fortunate in having architectural renderings of what it looked like. And the architect is named William A. Bates. He also did the Ridgefield Club and some other buildings around town. But he was well known in metropolitan New York. He did mansions, he did inns, hotels. We're also very fortunate to have a picture of, or a drawing of what the first floor uses were. And it's very interesting. I mean, here's a dining room, but here is, I have to listen to screaming kids. They're all down here. And way back here is the servants' dining room. So, and which is the smallest, probably that. There's the kitchen, service area. This is where coaches could pull in and people would get out and they'd come in this way. This is the front desk, and here's a bedroom, a sitting room, another bedroom, so that the staff who are running the place could live there. And we'll see some person who lived there in a minute. The hall, there's a little writing alcove here on each side of the fireplace. But you notice there's a fireplace there, there's a fireplace there, but you know, how do they, it must have been cold in there in the winter. I don't know how the kids could stay there. This is the thing that confuses me, is this area here. There's parlor, BR. I'm assuming that means bedroom, because they didn't call things bathrooms back then. So what is this? Is this somebody could have a little private suite for,
Yeah, maybe.
yeah. But it's right, this is the front. This is the Main Street out here. And this is the front porch. So this would be a very desirable location, except for all the people moving around. Pantry. This is very cool. There's another view of this place. This is Main Street out here. This is the back. And I just colorized it for the heck of it. And this is what things look like today. Now, some of those postcard views showed this wall. It ends there, and so the inn was over in here where this, I think, about 1980 houses today. Again, they couldn't afford to keep it going. But the guy who ran it from 1893 until 1903 or so was named Charles Roswell Bacon. And Charles Roswell Bacon was not primarily a innkeeper. He was an artist, an impressionist artist, and whose paintings sell for many thousands of dollars today. I cannot find a picture of him. The only thing I could find is this self-portrait. It's in the Library of Congress, and in which he draws himself in this note about how he misses his little daughter. And this is his little daughter, Margaret, who we'll see in a moment, who becomes a very famous person. But here's an example of a Charles Roswell Bacon picture. Here's another one. This one's called The Stream, but I don't think people generally look at just the stream there. He liked to paint nudes. And this is what happened to him. In 1913, he turned on the gas in his apartment then in New York and killed himself because, and his daughter said he was despondent over the lack of sales of his paintings. And he is buried in Ridgefield Cemetery. This is his stone. It says born in New York, died in New York. I'm not sure why he wanted to emphasize that. I can't, I'm not sure whether this stone once stood up or
Comes down
whether
to,
it's a
right?
flat stone. What's that? Okay. But there's Margaret, whose name is Peggy, Peggy Bacon, the daughter. And Peggy Bacon would become a well-known illustrator in the 1920s and 30s and 40s and 50s. She did New Yorker work, she did Vanity Fair. This is a portrait she did of Haywood Broun, who was a well-known journalist in the 20s and 30s. This is a picture that she did for Vanity Fair. Totally different style. Very talented. She also loved cats, and she illustrated many, many cat books, particularly for kids.
Wow.
And there's one of her paintings. And she was also a writer. And she wrote mystery novels. And this one was called, the New York Times said, was almost unbearable suspense. Lady marked for murder. And she wrote a number of mystery novels. Okay, we go up Main Street to where the fountain is today. What was it in 1903 when this postcard was mailed? And the guy who sent it says, church I went to on Sunday, clubhouse in back, and tennis courts. Well, until I saw this postcard, I never realized that the Ridgefield Club, which was right there, we'll see in a little bit, had tennis courts as well as all the other things that it had. So we're going to go down West Lane to the West Lane Inn, it says here. Does that look like the West Lane Inn that you know? It's across the street. This is that, a house across the street, which was built as the West Lane Inn in 1910. There's another view of it. And about the only thing that's different today is that this main staircase is now in the middle. But it soon became known as the Bluebird. And still, old-timers call it the Bluebird. I'm not sure they do, but it's still apartments. What's that? Does anybody know anybody that lived there? Or?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't remember her name.
Yeah, they were quite a few.
I like this old car that's over in the side of it. Here's a place I have not figured out where it was. A guy, I know who ran it. The guy's name was John Frederick Rafestanger. He was a sportsman. He was well known in the area, an excellent skeet shooter. But the Sportsman's Inn, and I think it may have been on Northern Main Street near Joe's Corner, but I'm not sure.
Those are distinctive, aren't they?
They're very Victorian, though. But I also get a big kick out of this picture. I mean, the dog looks like a sporting dog, like a kind of bring on a hunting trip or something. But you see those two people sitting on the porch, and you say, they don't look like sportsmen. And the first thing I thought of, you guys remember Ma and Pa Kettle? It looks just like them. Ma and Pa Kettle from the movies of the 40s and 50s. Okay, so some of the amenities that Ridgefield offered. This is the Ridgefield, the country club of Ridgefield, where you could play golf. This is the clubhouse. This is the inside of the clubhouse. It was on Gulf Lane and Peaceable Street. Here's pictures showing the various parts, various places on the golf course. These pictures were all taken by Marie Arctic Kendall, who we'll see a little about in a moment. And here's another view of the clubhouse, which I love because you can see sitting there the kids waiting to get jobs as caddies. And over in the back here, you can see their bicycles. I assume this is like a restaurant in the back. The interesting thing about this building is that it was moved to Grove Street by Francis Martin, who used it as his goat barn. And he had goats in there for years and
Yeah,
years.
he did.
And then the New England Institute for Medical Research took over the property, and it used this as a lab,
Yeah.
part of its labs.
Huh.
It was destroyed in a fire in the
Yeah, no,
80s or 90s, when the institute went bankrupt.
I think they did that. Where did they go?
And this is the Ridgefield Club, which we mentioned before, up by the First Congregational Church. This is a street view of it. Here's the assembly room, which would later be an auditorium and was used for all kinds of community activities, but in the late 30s, early 40s, was used for a summer theater with a lot of noteworthy stars came here and performed. This is the reception area. It's another look at that street view. I think much of this building over here became the Congregational Church House, the place where they had their events, and it was destroyed in a fire in the 1980s, replaced by Lund Hall. This is the billiard room, the bowling alley, which was used in town for years and years. Anybody
Yeah.
here bowl in that alley?
Mothers did. Our fathers did. Mothers did.
So souvenirs, you had to have souvenirs if you were catering to tourists. And here's I'm just going to show you a few. This is Baja. What's the name of that? What's that? Yeah, that Mexican restaurant on Main Street.
Very simple.
Still, yeah, very
Finch
Finch
building.
Still there.
Right there.
But this would have been about 1905. There's the PD building, and the town hall would be up there. This is a cup and saucer showing the Stebbins house and the battlegrounds for the Battle of Ridgefield. This is the house that was torn down to make way for the Casagno Mansion on northern Main Street. I don't think these are particularly attractive illustrations, but the cup is elegant. It's very, very nice. These were made in England. These were Keeler Tavern. Even though the Keeler Tavern was held by the Keeler and Resicke families until early 1900s, it really had faded out as a place to stay. The people that operated it weren't too interested in getting involved in the tourist craze, and so it was a low-key place, but it was still a tourist attraction in that it had that cannonball embedded in it, and it's very old tavern. So here you have cups and saucers and plates with the Keeler Tavern on it. Also have various little books that were published. This is how big that book is. This was published by Bissell's, and it's nothing but pictures, so that you can remember the places. If you stayed there, here's a picture at the end. I think there's a Bailey Inn, a picture too. If you went to the center of town, which you undoubtedly did, there's a picture of the center of town. There's a blow-up of that picture. Yeah, you can see, this is the Bissell building. This building was removed and replaced with a brick two-story building. The Masonic Hall, Town Hall, Obedient Building, about 1900. Remember I mentioned Alan Nevins living at the Elms? Well, while he was there, he wrote a 48-page book for the Elms to, I guess, give to his customers. This is what the book looks like, and it's not a picture book, but it's got a lot of text, and it probably is the first book that this Pulitzer Prize-winning writer and professor ever wrote. And he did it for the Elms. This book, which is too delicate to open up and pass around, was published in 1900, and I have some samples of the pictures that were in it, and I also have, if anybody's interested, a reproduction of the what's inside the book. To pass that around. Views of Ridgefield, hundreds of, more than 100 views of Ridgefield, some of them very small. Marie Kendall, who did the book, that's for, was born in France, came to the United States to study nursing, but got interested in photography. This is the camera that she actually used. And this is in the days when you had glass negatives. Every picture was on a single glass plate like this. So you would buy a box of plates. This is a box of unused plates. And you'd have to go in a dark room and put each plate into a carrier that looks like this, that would go in the back of the camera for each picture that you were going to take. So if you were going to go out on an assignment, you not only have to lug that and a heavy tripod to hold it, you'd have to lug a bunch of these glass negatives. The glass itself was heavy, and each one of the wooden carriers was heavy. There was a lot of weight, and that little woman, she was a short woman. She lugged that stuff into, she took pictures of Sarah Bishop's cave, which is like a mile hike through the woods to get to. And she was amazing. She went on to work in live in Norfolk, Connecticut. The reason that she came to Ridgefield is she married Dr. John Calvin Kendall, who was the son of Dr. Calvin Kendall, a longtime Ridgefield physician who lived just south of the Congregational Church. One of the more unusual items for this was this fan postcard. You mail it like this. This was actually mailed. It's got this stamp on it. It was mailed to somebody in Hartford. And so you take this thing, and it's got a little tab on it, and you go like this.
So cool.
And you have a whole bunch of views of And it's all held together with a ribbon. Very, it's amazing that this thing still.
Wonder where it was.
But it's different scenes of town, you know, here's the Congregational Church, the Episcopal Church gets big play. There's just about the same scene we saw at the beginning. There's the inn at the south end of Main Street, the town hall. Can't make out what that is. I don't know what that is. But anyway, another kind is the souvenir folder, which looks like that. And I think they were doing those until fairly recently. But 10 attached postcards all together. There's the Sunset Hall Mansion. There's the up on the mountain, the Port of Missing Men Inn. Yeah. That the King Homestead there? Here's another look at that. Yeah, that's the King Homestead. A lot of gardens, but black and white, so it's kind of boring. As opposed to this, which is one of my favorite all-time postcards, hand-colored. This is the fountain around 1920, soon after it was put in 1916. And there's loads and loads of these postcards. I have 8 albums of postcards, all different. And I brought in 2 in case anybody wants to see some examples of the postcards that were sold to tourists back then. There were many, many beautiful scenes and many places that you can't, that are gone now and have been lost, and other places that are remarkably the same. I mean, this thing is up in the air now. That house is still there. There's no tree there now. But so, as I said, the popularity of the automobile, giving people an opportunity to drive themselves farther away, kind of did in Ridgefield as a tourist center, and its next step would be as a commuter center, which I guess it sort of is today. Thank you very much.
If anyone has any specific questions for Jack, okay. Any specific questions for Jack or anything you guys want to add to the conversation?
eBay is a lot.
Okay, none? Well,
Although
This
I
is just
rarely
a-
see anything that I don't have.
Souvenir? Jack,
What's that?
that's a souvenir that fell right into the time frame of what we're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
And I usually collect Ruby Flash red, but that's from like the 1890s, 1910. And when I ever saw Ridgefield on top. So I'll pass it around if you promise to be careful.
I don't want to
Is that for, what is it for, paper clips or?
Anything. And that's, you know, just
Jewelry case.
And then this was taken in Ridgefield, which they probably were doing during the resort time, riding a bike. I wish somebody knew who she was. But it was taken.
That's a,
dangerous riding a bike with a long
Yeah.
skirt.
Yeah. But I think it's a Jack first. Go this one first.
those were very popular.
Isn't that pretty?
What does it say, Sarah? It's Sarah somebody.
It's wonderful. Does anyone have any questions for Jack?
Does anybody remember the elms before the Scalas?
The elms before the
Harry.
scholars.
Harry.
About Marie Kondo. You said that was the actual camera she used, or the actual model that she used?
I believe it's the actual camera. That was from the Norfolk Historical Society. They had a big exhibit of her stuff. And they had a book. I don't know if you read the book. It was an amazing person.
Wouldn't it ever find it? Oh, it's a better time for everybody.
She did all the chemistry too. Development. Awful chemicals. Very toxic.
The railroad came right up through here, correct? And then what did it do, cross over on Grove to go to where the lumber yard is now?
Yeah, and then it just
Then what did
curved.
it turn around? How did it turn?
It
Reverse
went
itself.
all the way across Prospect Street up Haley Avenue to about where the curve is. And early on, apparently, there was a round table that they could use to turn the engine around. But for some reason or other, they abandoned that. Apparently, as the engines got bigger, it was not worth it. So the trains basically pulled the cars, and it was only usually an express car, a passenger car, and plus a coal car on that train. Pulled it up and then backed it down. Pulling up was the hard part. Backing down, they just had to keep the brakes on.
Yeah, the train crossed over Prospect.
Yeah,
It did cross over.
Yeah, they had to, right?
Yeah,
never
it crossed,
seen
there wasn't any, guards to stop it, but the train crossed over and went up toward Dickie Bell's house.
Yeah, but I was wondering how it turned around up there to
Yeah,
go back.
I never paid any of.
No, neither did I.
No, we used to put pennies on the tracks because it went right in the back of our house.
Yeah.
Sunset Lane to me is Railroad Avenue.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry,
Well, it
Joyce.
used to be. Formerly, it was Railroad Avenue.
Yeah.
Not till 1960 something, they changed it.
The other thing about the Elms Inn is Ruth Wills lived there for
Yeah.
years.
trains.
I mean, you were talking about family, she lived there. Miss Wills,
No, that
and she had a boyfriend that would use it.
Jimmy, yeah, Jimmy.
Jimmy what?
Jimmy Brandy.
Yeah.
Supply houses.
My mother worked there from the time she was 13. From the time she was 13, so that had to be around 1927, because she was born in 1914.
No, you're right.
And until
To Danbury.
she was married in 1939, past 1939. She started out washing dishes, and then she worked up to a waitress.
My mother was also a waitress at the Elms.
Yeah.
Well, from what I understand, it was Giancarlo Scala, John Scala, who really made that place.
Yeah.
It wasn't as known for its food the way it became known under him. Does that sound
Yeah,
right?
I don't know. All my mom said was that on she worked all the time, but on holidays, the scholars would let her go home for a family lunch because her uncles came from Poughkeepsie. I mean, that's the one issue. And she said she worked hard enough to become a waitress. She started out washing dishes in the kitchen.
Jack, Dick Scala still lives in Meadow Ridge and he's sharp. So if you want some information from him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Dick.
Yeah.
Billy, see at the diner too on Potomac Street.
So, I'm sorry, I missed some of the conversation. So the line, the train line, that went from Grand Central into Ridgefield, that was given up because it was a difficult line, or because of cars?
The
or-
passenger service ended in
Ended.
1925 because of cars.
Okay,
Yeah.
People didn't need to take the train, although there were some people who did. I mean, there was a guy on Main Street who took the train every day of his life,
Wow.
every working day, from the 1870s until about 1931.
uh-huh,
And he had to go to Branchville after they shut
yes,
the passenger service here.
yeah,
And the freight service ended in '64.
Yeah.
And about the only thing the freight service was doing was bringing stuff up to Ridgefield Supply.
Yeah, to Mississippi
Just
Price.
some other coal dealers.
It was lumber.
And,
so there was never any thought after that to think about commuting from New York City as, commuters, to restart the train station?
You'd have to
or-
relay to the tracks,
Yeah, oh, okay,
because they tore up the tracks.
minor detail.
They also planted great big power poles.
Power
The
poles.
town's electric service
Okay.
comes
That's
in,
what it is now.
the rail bed.
Electric one.
Yeah,
Would have been nice.
yeah, well, yeah,
We
we would have
really
moved here a
did
lot
become a commuter
earlier.
town.
Things would be so much different.
Well, it would be, it probably would, it wouldn't be the same town, it wouldn't be what it is today,
It was still, that would be a grind
yeah,
to take that 4-mile trip up and that
Yes.
4-mile trip
Yeah.
down. They'd have to do it very slowly.
yeah. But that's part of the beauty of Ridgefield, of not having commuters from New York City.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, any other questions or comments or memories or stories that you'd like to share? Okay, well, if not, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Jack. This was amazing. I learned so much. Thank you, thank you. And I'd like to remind you all that our next gathering for the Ridgefield History Club will be here at the Scott House on Tuesday, August 19th at 10 o'clock, and we're going to be talking about Ridgefield sports. So it's back to school season, and we know that baseball and softball and football and basketball were big. There were lots of memorable coaches and school teams in Ridgefield's history, so bring your sports memories for our next meeting. Thank you.
August 19th.